between rights, legal and moral rights, and one of the first meta-ethical rules which might be very helpful in our discussion is if there is a conflict between morality and legality, between morals and what the law is saying, the morality should be treated as to be overriding. Sometimes it's always said, okay, morality should trump legality, but I don't like the word trump now, and so I better stick to the word overriding. Okay, and on resources, you will know the the usual classifications between natural resources, human intelligence resources, and intelligence might have the two different senses of being intelligent, what you need to be an intelligent person, or what you have to do in order to fit to the state intelligence. But I don't go into the small difference. And of course, there are some principles in this context as far as the resources are concerned, which are extremely necessary, extremely often used, and even more often misused. Namely, the principle, again a meta-ethical principle, in Latin is spelled ultra posse nemo obligatur, which means ought implies can in English, or yeah, you must not if you can't. You have no obligation if you can't do what the obligation would have you to do. And in this context, of course, we very often come up with the slogan, okay, we can't help the refugees, sorry, our boat is already full up. And this, okay, would need to go into a better interpretation of what the correct interpretation of ultra posse nemo obligatur is. The main question is it really the case that it is impossible for you to do something, or do you just mean by I can't, I don't wish, or I don't will, or I'm not in favor of? And that, of course, is a very deep difference. Now, as far as the consequences are concerned, of course, we should have to distinguish between the economic, cultural, and political consequences, referring to the effectiveness, or to the stability, or to the security again. And what these different dimensions mean for our decisions we have to make. And when we talk of decisions, of course, we have to make the usual distinctions as in general decision theory, namely between different situations. Do you know what will happen? Then you have a decision under certainty. If you know that if you do such and such a thing, such and such consequences will result, that's a different story than if you are not sure, if you don't know what the consequences are, but have only some weak or more or less weak suggestions, if you have only probabilities, or you don't have, this would be the third type of decision, if you are totally uncertain, even have no suggestions, then okay, you are in a situation of uncertainty. And of course, the principles for what to do a rational decision are quite different in this field. And this would have to be of some relevance for our moral decisions, of course. Because next meta principle would be, don't ask people for morally obligations if to follow these moral obligations would be irrational. That's a very clear connection principle between what morality is after and what rationality is favoring for. Okay, and of course with regards, I just go to the middle. Consequential arguments are the most difficult arguments to discuss due to the complexity of the evidence. And with regards to the economic consequences of open refugee policies. There are polar, I don't know what's the polar, thanks, polar opposite positions, claiming either catastrophe or paradise, namely the economic paradise of unleashing unrealized new market potentials. And when looking to the economic discussion of what the consequences of open or closed refugee policies would be, you will find everything between these two polars. But at least you have the general point that ethical assessment depends on facts about what the consequences of the different options of your actions are. And again, we notice a very deep discrepancy between empirical sciences, which are looking after the empirical consequences, versus politics and propaganda. And highly relevant is this following quotation from one of our big figures. Conventional xenophobic wisdom has argued that the consequences are uniformly negative for the host welfare state. However, the empirical evidence does not support this position. Refugee ethics, as ethics in general, should rely on the facts, not on propaganda. Okay, now I skip the history part and skip again this different distinctions between whether we are talking on individuals, groups or institutions, and just jump to a very essential distinction in the context of migration and refugees, namely what type of migration are we talking about when we are talking on refugees. Okay, in general we have to distinguish between voluntary migration and forced migration. And surely refugees are not a kind of voluntary migration. They are forced kinds of migration. And the distinction is whether the migration takes place inside the country or whether it is necessary to cross the border of the country. And now refugee in the usual sense is defined just as here given by the normal red printing, whereas the refugee definition as given in the Geneva Convention in 1951 is red in the bold sense. And so we see the Geneva discussion is just referring to a particular kind of refugees, not what the normal linguistic usage would cover. So who is a refugee? That is of course defined in a legally obligatory way internationally in the meantime in the already mentioned Geneva Convention from 1951. Everybody will know it who is engaged in this field. But nevertheless, let's just repeat it. Any person is a refugee who is owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable or owing to such a fear is unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country. And of course this definition is very often criticized by being too narrow in order to apply for the present cases we are confronted with. It's not only just that the people are persecuted by the state or by some other groups within their country, but they are spelled out by the consequences of war, of famine, etc., by climatic consequences of the climatic catastrophe, and so on. So in order to catch up with reality, we should extend this definition. And that's of course one of the big issues of ethics as far as it is concerned with refugees. How can we best widen this, this concept. Just to make this distinction clear in this small picture, refugees as defined in 51 is a special case only of refugees in the wide sense. But why should we restrict to this narrow definition? My ethical answer is we should not restrict. But then the question is, why is there a general restriction to this narrow definition? And the very plausible answer to this question is, well, this definition is the product of real-world political pressure from leaders who worry about the international legal demands entailed by a more expansive definition. Of course, it's a political pressure behind this narrow definition. And of course, our question is, why should we give in this narrow pressure? This pressure for a narrow definition. And you know already my answer, we should not give in. Okay, now we come to the essential part, to normative refugee ethics by our own. And I will start with one of my most famous colleagues, the most famous philosopher at the present time, and the most contested one in ethics at the present time. Really, it is my friend Peter Singer. And he started with an article with his wife, Renate Singer, very early written. It's published in 1988, but written very early. And it has the title of The Ethics of Refugee Policy. And so you'll see that the title of my lecture and the title of our joint workshop is a hidden homage to Peter and to Renate. And we started our discussion in the workshop with an article printed again in an abbreviated version in his most famous book on practical ethics. And he starts with noticing that very few philosophers have given any attention to the issue of refugees, even though it is clearly one of the major moral issues of our time and raises significant questions about who is a member of our moral community, not just of our political community, not just of our family, not just of our race, not just of our tribe, not just of our nation, but of our moral community. And but he did pay this attention. He was missing, on the whole field up to then, namely by embedding the issue into the wider context of questions about global poverty and inequalities on the global level, and by rigorously applying his famous principle of PECI, the principle of equal consideration or equal concern of equal interests. And what does it mean? It means just if the interests are the same of different persons of different sexes, of persons of different races, of different nations, of different tribes, they should count the same. It should not matter whether it's an interest of a person, of a man, or of a woman. If they have the same interest, let's say interest in getting some work, they should count the same. They should give them the same weight. And so this is a minimal ethics which is anti-discrimination. It's against egoism, and egoism is the center of being a non-ethical person. If you are an egoist, you have nothing to do with ethics. And of course, the alternative to being to be an egoist is to be an altruist. Yeah? And ethics starts with being an altruist. And you must be an anti-racist, and you must be an anti-sexist and an anti-speciesist, because Singer was famous and was getting most famous by letting in even the interests of other animals, not just human animals, but of other sorts of animals. Let's say great apes, like chimpanzees, and if they have the same interest as we have, their interests should count the same amount as our interests, and that's anti-speciesism, of course, and it's anti-nationalism. And of course, when coming to the refugee ethics, the anti-nationalism and the anti-collective anti-egoism is the decisive point. And so this principle leads immediately to be what we call an effective altruism, and applied to refugee ethics, it just comes to the point: refugees are and should be and ought to be members of our moral community. And that means that refugees' needs count more than insiders' luxury interests. And that's, of course, a very simple decision rule which would decide many big questions just in 1 second. Okay, and I just skip again the main points he's making and come to the next big figure we had discussed in our workshop, namely Michael Walzer. Michael Walzer was the big figure in the so-called discussion on just war theories. And just war theories, of course, are found again in all the known, at least in the monotheistic religions, and there is some case where it might be justified to go to war. If your country is being, let's say, suppressed by another state, you have the right to fight against it, even by taking recourse to violence. And though I'm an ethicist, I'm not a pacifist. I'm subscribing to the, let's say, just war theory. And Michael Walzer was the big figure which took this part onto the level of a secular ethics. Up to then it was only discussed in religious contexts. But now his interest is quite a different one. In the just war theory he was developing, going back of course through history, he was a universalist, namely he was taking the stance of trying to spell out a universal ethics. Now he is just jumping to the other side. He's going to be a particularist, and namely referring to be different spheres of justice in different societies, or in different cultures, or in different religions. He's just starting with the other paradigm. And he's the first and the only political theorist systematically to apply the so-called shared understanding, social meanings, or the, as it is very often called, communitarian approach to immigration entrance decisions. Communitarian because he starts with this different sorts of communities and starts to what is treated to be the morally correct way of behaving within the particular community, not just on the universal level. If it might turn out that we end up with some universal standpoint in the end, fine, but not necessary as and not even welcome for the starting point. And what's a strictly social fact? Social meanings are strictly social fact. And now, of course, it sounds a bit very abstract, but I will give you an example and you will understand it, I hope, immediately. A fact A is, now just look at the definition, is a strictly social fact, a SSFF, if and only if the fact in question is true, if and only if, and that's essential, if it is common belief in the relevant community, in the relevant population, P is standing for population, that this is the case. Just to give you the example, money is the paradigm case for having a thing which a social meaning, which is strictly social fact. Money is money only because in the relevant community it is taken to be money. Everybody knows that if you give someone a sheet of paper of a special sort, you are paying something with this. You can pay it. And even it's the other way around, it is sufficient. If everybody believes that what you are putting on the table is money, it is money. It is common belief that it is money which is constitutive to be money. And the same holds with my paradigm case. My paradigm case, because I had worked on this paradigm for nearly 20 years, is linguistic meaning. That's my essential topic before I started to jump into applied ethics, before I met Peter Singer. Linguistic meaning. Everybody knows that linguistic meaning is relative to a particular society. Unfortunately, we don't have what someone might call a universal language. There are different cultures and different societies, even different tribes, even different families, even different, let's say, secret friendships which have their own language. But for all of these languages it holds. If it is believed and known between the communicators in the different groups, in the different communities, that when saying such and such a thing, okay, it has such communicative meaning. It has this meaning. And it would be just absurd to postulate, okay, there might be meanings in your language, but nobody knows about them. Okay, so if you have understood this paradigm cases, you have understood all you need for knowing what a social good is. It's a social good just getting by this social facts. And now just to summarize in a very rough way the whole theory of Michael Walz's on one page. All the goods in a society are social goods. Within a society there is nothing which is a good without being a social fact. And in every society, in every population, there are multiple dimensions or multiple spheres of social goods. This is what he means by plurality of social goods. And now the essential point, of course, membership in the particular population itself is a primary social good. That means what it means is totally depending from the common knowledge of what membership is within the particular society. And then, of course, his most disputed theorem 4, no political community is thinkable or even possible without a distinctive culture. Cultures are cultures only if there are distinctive cultures. Of course, and this is implying a very huge sub-theorems. We should have necessary discussion on it, but it's not possible just in this summary. And then no distinctive culture is possible, and that's of course essential for the application to the refugee case. No distinctive culture is possible without a politics of closure. And by closure he means there must be, see definition below, there must be an enforceable authority within the population to its own admissions policy. And this admissions policy is not necessarily an acceptance policy, it might be a refusal policy too. And otherwise you won't have a distinctive culture. And so, of course, he ends up with